Professor Zilthrax adjusted his crystalline spectacles and gazed upon his inner spee's survival techniques. Class with what could generously be called academic enthusiasm, the lecture hall buzzed with the usual suspects. 3 Valkyrian exchange students who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, a pair of Nixari twins who communicated entirely through color-ranging skin patterns, 2 Thraxians whose idea of survival was complaining loudly until someone else solved their problems, and sitting in the back corner like he owned the place, 1 human named Marcus Chen. Today, Zilthrax announced with the theatrical flair of someone who clearly practiced his lectures in the mirror, we shall explore the ancient art of food preservation. Each species has developed unique methods to extend the shelf life of their sustenance during times of scarcity. One of the Valkyrians, a lanky fellow named Kor, raised a tentacled appendage. Professor, my species simply hibernates. During food shortages, we can survive for months without eating by entering a metabolic stasis. Ah yes, Zilthrax nodded approvingly. The Valkyrian approach, elegant in its simplicity, the Nexi twins pulsed a synchronized pattern of blue and green, which their translator device helpfully announced as, our people cultivate symbiotic fungi that continue producing nutrients even in harsh conditions. We essentially carry our food supply within our bodies. Fascinating biological integration, the professor beamed, and the Thraxians. The first Thraxian, whose name sounded like someone gargling gravel but was apparently spelled Gorsak, puffed up his chest plates. We Thraxians have developed advanced freeze-drying techniques that can preserve protein blocks for decades. Our technology is unmatched in the galaxy. Wonderful. Wonderful. Zilthrax clapped his 4 hands together. And what about you, Marcus? How do humans preserve food? Every head, tentacle, and optical sensor in the room turned toward the human who had been quietly sketching something in his notebook. Marcus looked up with that particular expression humans got when they were about to say something that would make everyone else question their life choices. Well, Marcus began scratching his chin thoughtfully. We usually just build Smokehouse. The silence that followed was so profound that you could have heard a Quixian dust mite sneeze. Professor Zilthrax blinked his compound eyes. I'm sorry, did you say smoke houses? Yeah, Marcus shrugged. You know, you build a little wooden structure, get a fire going, hang up some meat, let the smoke do its thing, keeps for months. That way, sometimes years if you do it right. Kor's tentacles writhed. Confusion. You intentionally expose your food to combustion byproducts. Not combustion exactly, Marcus clarified, now warming to his subject. That dangerous way humans did when they started explaining things. You want a nice slow burn, low temperature. The smoke contains compounds that inhibit bacterial growth while adding flavor. It's actually pretty sophisticated when you think about it. The Nexari twins flashed what their translator interpreted as deep skepticism mixed with mild nausea. But surely, Professor Zilthrax interjected, this is merely one of many preservation methods your species employs. Marcus tilted his head. Oh sure, we've got tons of ways to preserve food. There's salting, drying, fermentation, pickling, canning, freezing, but smoking is probably my favorite. You get to play with fire and make food taste better. What's not to love? One of the Thraxians, whose name was apparently Vorak, or possibly a Digestive sound clicked his mandibles. Dismissively. Primitive chemical processes hardly worthy of a species that claims to be spacefaring. Marcus' eyes lit up with that particular gleam that had historically preceded humans doing something spectacularly inadvisable, yet somehow successful. "You know what?" he said, closing his notebook with a decisive snap. "I'll show you primitive." 3 days later, Professor Zilthrax received a communication that Marcus Chen would not be attending class because he was busy constructing something educational in the campus courtyard. This was concerning for several reasons, not least of which was that humans had a disturbing tendency to consider explosions educational. Zilthrax hurried to the courtyard, expecting to find either a crater or Marcus in custody. Instead, he discovered something that defied all academic expectations. Marcus had built what appeared to be a small wooden shed with a chimney, surrounded by the largest gathering of curious students the campus had seen since the infamous Quixian mating dance incident of last semester. "Marcus," the professor called out, pushing through the crowd of onlookers. "What exactly are you doing?" The human emerged from behind his construction, covered in sawdust and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who had just proved a point in the most elaborate way possible. "Building a smokehouse," figured. "I demonstrate proper food preservation techniques in the middle of our educational institution. Where else am I going to get test subjects?" Marcus gestured to the assembled crowd. "I mean, willing participants in a cultural exchange." At that moment, the most remarkable thing happened. The air filled with an aroma that could only be described as transcendent. It was rich, complex, carrying hints of wood smoke and something that made every species present suddenly remember they had skipped breakfast. "What?" whispered Core, his tentacles actually quivering. "Is that smell?" Marcus grinned. "That would be the brisket. Been smoking for about 6 hours now. Should be ready soon." The crowd pressed closer. Somewhere in the back, a Zephyrian was making small whimpering noises. "Now," Marcus continued, clearly enjoying himself, "smoking isn't just about preservation, it's about transformation. You take a tough cut of meat, expose it to low heat and aromatic smoke for hours, and you end up with something completely different. The proteins break down, the flavors develop, the exterior forms this beautiful crust we call bark." Professor Zilthrax found himself unconsciously moving closer to the smokehouse. This is actually quite sophisticated." "Oh, we're just getting started," Marcus said, opening the smokehouse door. The aroma that escaped was so intense that 3 students in the front row actually sat down hard. He pulled out what looked like a dark, glistening slab of meat that seemed to glow with internal perfection. "Who wants to try some?" The stampede was immediate and decisive. Within minutes, Marcus found himself surrounded by alien species, begging for samples of his smoked brisket. The Valkyrians declared it the most revolutionary thing they'd tasted since evolving taste buds. The Nexari twins turned colors that didn't exist in their emotional spectrum. The Thraxians, despite their earlier dismissal of primitive techniques, were making noises that could only be described as deeply inappropriate for an academic setting. "This is impossible," Gorzak mumbled around a mouthful of perfectly smoked meat. "Our food technicians have spent Centuries developing preservation methods, and you've created something superior with wood and fire. Marcus shrugged modestly. Well, when you've had a few thousand years too. Perfect barbecue, you tend to get good at it. By the end of the week, Marcus had received 17 requests to cater campus events, 43 marriage proposals from various species, and one offer to establish a permanent cultural exchange program based entirely around smoked meats. Professor Zilthrax found him in the courtyard the following Monday, tending to what had somehow evolved into a small barbecue restaurant. Marcus, the professor said, settling into one of the makeshift chairs that had appeared around the smokehouse, I believe you may have missed the point of the assignment. Did I? Marcus asked, basting something that smelled like heaven had opened a delicatessen, because I was told to preserve food. And look. He gestured to a line of students that stretched around 2 buildings. I've got a 3-week waiting list. That's preservation through popularity. This is not what food preservation means, isn't it though? Marcus flipped what appeared to be some kind of alien fish that was developing a gorgeous golden crust. Traditional preservation is about making food last longer so you don't starve. But this, he waved his hand at the thriving business that had somehow sprouted in the middle of an academic institution. This creates sustainable demand. I'm not just preserving food. I'm preserving the knowledge of how to prepare it. I'm preserving cultural techniques. I'm preserving the joy of eating. A Quishian student approached the counter with eyes that were roughly the size of dinner plates. Excuse me, but do you have any more of those smoked root vegetables? They're the only thing that's made me forget about my existential dread in weeks. Marcus handed over a plate with a smile. Coming right up, and try the smoked cheese. It'll change your perspective on dairy products. Professor Zilthrax watched the student float away in a state of bliss that was visible from orbit. I suppose, he admitted reluctantly, this could be considered a comprehensive cultural demonstration. Plus, Marcus added, checking on another batch of meat, I'm teaching practical skills. Half the students want to learn how to build their own Smokehouse. The Thraxians have been here every day, taking notes on temperature control. Even the Nixari twins are asking about wood selection, as if summoned by the mention of their name. The Nixari twins approached, flashing patterns of deep gratitude mixed with desperate hunger. Marcus, their translator, announced, we have been attempting to recreate your smoking technique in our dormitory. However, we may have slightly miscalculated the smoke density requirements. Let me guess, Marcus said, not looking up from his work. You hotboxed your room and set off the fire suppression system. The twins flashed what was unmistakably embarrassment. The campus safety office wishes to speak with us regarding proper ventilation procedures. Marcus laughed, that warm human sound that had become as much a fixture of the courtyard as the smokehouse itself. Tell you what, I'll teach you how to build a proper setup this weekend, but we're doing it outside and we're starting with the basics. By the end of the semester, Marcus' impromptu smokehouse had become such an integral part of campus life that the administration officially incorporated it into the curriculum as a practical cultural exchange laboratory. Professor Zilthrax found himself co-ing a course called Advanced Preservation Techniques and Their Social Applications, which was the fastest filling elective in the universities. History, the waiting list for Marcus. Weekend smoking workshops stretched into the next academic year. Several species had sent official delegations to study human food preparation techniques. The Thraxian Dietary Council had formally requested a technology transfer agreement, apparently not understanding that the technology in question was essentially controlled fire and patience. You realize, Professor, Zilthrex said one afternoon as they watched a group of Valkyrian engineering students attempt to build their own smokehouse, that you fundamentally altered the social dynamics of this institution. Marcus watched one of the Valkyrians accidentally nail his tentacle to a board and helped him work it free. Good or bad, I'm honestly not sure, Zilthrax admitted. Academic performance is up across all species. Social interaction has increased by 300%. The cafeteria is reporting its first profit in 15 years because students are finally interested in food. On the other hand, we've had to hire additional maintenance staff to deal with all the unauthorized smokehouses various students keep building. Unauthorized. The Kishians built one in their dorm room. The Zapirians constructed what can only be described as a smoking cathedral in the botanical gardens. And don't get me started on what the Nexari twins did to the physics lab. Marcus grinned. Sounds like they're really embracing the learning experience. At that moment, Core approached with what appeared to be his own attempt at smoked fish. It was charcoal black on the outside and somehow still moving. Marcus, he said, hopefully, I believe I may have misunderstood some of the subtleties of the smoking process just a bit. Marcus agreed diplomatically, but hey, that's how you learn. Besides, even burnt fish is better than no fish. Actually, Core said sadly, this was originally a potted plant. The final exam for the survival techniques class was held in the courtyard. Naturally, instead of written tests, students were required to demonstrate their chosen preservation method while explaining its cultural significance and practical applications. The Valkyrians had perfected a kind of smoke hibernation technique that they claimed would revolutionize their species' approach to resource management. The Nexari twins presented a symbiotic fungi that they had somehow trained to produce smoke-lavored nutrients. The Thraxians, in a complete reversal of their earlier position, had built what could only be described as a technological marvel that automated the entire smoking process while maintaining what they called optimal flavor profiles. And Marcus set up a simple grill and cooked burgers for everyone. You see, he explained to the assembled crowd while flipping patties with practiced ease. Food preservation isn't really about the food, it's about community. It's about sharing knowledge, passing down traditions, bringing people together. You can have the most advanced preservation technology in the galaxy, but if nobody wants to sit down and eat with you, what's the point? He gestured to the courtyard, which had transformed over the semester from a sterile academic space into something resembling a cross between a farmer's market and a block party. Species that had barely acknowledged each other's existence were now sharing recipes and arguing about proper seasoning techniques. The best preservation method, Marcus continued, is making food so good that people go to extraordinary lengths to keep the tradition alive. Professor Zilthrax looked around at his students, all of whom were eagerly waiting for their share of Marcus burgers while discussing their own culinary experiments. The Thraxians were debating wood types with the Valkyrians. The Nexari twins were teaching a group of Quixians about flavor profiles. Someone had started a betting pool on who could build the most efficient smokehouse. I believe, he announced formally, that everyone passes. The cheer that went up could be heard from orbit, where a passing merchant vessel immediately changed course to investigate what they assumed was either a celebration or an invasion. They found instead a small educational institution that had somehow become the unofficial barbecue capital of the local star system. 6 months later, Marcus received a formal offer from the Galactic Culinary Institute to establish the first Interesse's Smoking Academy. The proposal came with a substantial budget, complete creative control, and a diplomatic passport that would allow him to travel to any world in known space for the purpose of advancing cross-cultural understanding through applied smoke-based food preparation techniques. He turned it down. Why, Professor? Zilthrax asked, genuinely baffled. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. You could spread your techniques across the galaxy, influence billions of beings, become the most famous human chef in the universe. Marcus looked around the courtyard where his students were busy tending to their various smoking experiments while arguing about everything from optimal temperature ranges to the philosophical implications of flavor enhancement. You know what I'd be doing out there? He asked. Teaching techniques, showing people how to replicate what I do. But here he gestured to where a Thraxian was patiently explaining fire management to a group of Quishian youngsters. Here, I'm teaching them to teach each other. This isn't about me anymore. It's about them. 3 years later, the university officially renamed the courtyard the Marcus Chen Memorial Smokehouse Complex, which confused Marcus considerably since he was still very much alive and still teaching there. It's not a memorial, the dean explained. It's commemorative. We're commemorating your impact on interspecies relations through the medium of perfectly smoked meat. The complex now featured 17 different types of smokehouses representing techniques from 12 different species. Students from across the galaxy applied specifically to attend the university's renowned preservation and cultural exchange program. The waiting list for Marcus advanced classes was measured years, and every Friday without fail, Marcus would fire up the original smokehouse and cook for anyone who wanted to eat. No reservations, no payment required, no species restrictions, just good food and better company. You know, Professor Zilthrax said one afternoon as they watched a Zapirian successfully flip a burger for the first time, I think we may have stumbled onto something important here. Marcus handed him a plate loaded with perfectly smoked ribs. Yeah, what's that? The real secret to survival, Zilthrax said thoughtfully, isn't about preserving food. It's about preserving the reasons why survival matters in the first place. Marcus smiled, watching his students laugh and argue and learn from each other in the way that only happened when people came together over something they all cared about. Now you're getting it, he said. Pass the sauce. And in the distance, carried on the evening breeze, came the sound of 17 different species trying to harmonize. Happy birthday for Aquixian students. Hatching day celebration, while the smoke from a dozen different experiments rose into the sky like incense from the galaxy's most delicious temple. Some lessons, it turned out, were best learned with a full stomach and friends to share them with.